Hello everyone, welcome back to the workshop, and today I'm taking it a step back from all the high-powered lasers and expensive things, and we're taking a look at the new P1S Pro from Acmer Laser. This is a 6-watt diode laser that really doesn't have too many of the bells and whistles that we've been starting to see in newer lasers, but we're going to find out in this day and age of 40 and even now 70-watt lasers coming out, what can we do with a 6-watt laser, and is it something that might be useful for you? So if this sounds interesting to you, want to check it out, stay tuned. We're going to jump right into it. All right, so here we have the Acmer 6-watt P1 S Pro laser. Now, I'm not going to cover the whole build in this. I actually did the unboxing and build on a live stream, and I'll have that link down below, but I will show a few clips from that as well as talk about some of the features, and then I also want to point out one thing that I maybe kind of got wrong in that build with the cable management. I'll show you what I did here to correct that, but real quickly, let's go over the rough specs of this laser. As I mentioned earlier, this is a 6-watt diode laser, so it has a single diode emitter in there, and then it has a focus lens, but that brings that focus spot down to 0.06 millimeters, which is a nice fine spot and what we typically see in these diode lasers. Now, it does have a working area of 380 by 370 millimeters, or roughly 14.5 by 14.9 inches. So pretty typical in there, a little bit smaller than your 400 by 400, but not by much. It is all built from mostly 20 by 20 extruded aluminum, and then they do have, some nice markings on there. They do have a ruler on the side. That's not really for laser positioning, but you can use it for roughly gauging the size of your material and such. And then they do tout that this can operate up to 10,000 millimeters a minute. With a 6-watt diode, you're not going to be going much faster anyway. That's going to be maxing out the engraving abilities at that speeds. But it does give you a nice wide range of movement on this one. They do tout that you can cut up to 4 millimeter thick plywood with this. Now, this laser doesn't have an air assist, and it has that single diode emitter, so its cutting ability is going to be a little bit restricted, but we're going to test later to see what we can get through in some solid material as well as some plywoods to kind of take a look at what's going to be practical with this laser. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm not going to go over the whole build on this, but it bolts together fairly simple. They provide all the hardware. They provide the bags in individual steps, so they're fairly easy to identify, but they do have a few different bolts for each step. So just be making sure that when you're getting your initial frame together, you're grabbing the right bolts. So up on the front here, we do have our control box, and on the outer side, we do have the power switch, as well as a Wi-Fi antenna for connecting from a smart app. And then over on this side, we actually have our power plug, USB cable, micro SD slot, and then what looks like a micro HDMI slot, possibly for an offline controller. One note on this, I do like having the switches and things off to the sides, although I really wish these were kind of reversed, that the power switch and the the Wi-Fi were on the inside and the power cables were all on the outside, mainly because you have to route those cables away, and that it'd be nice if they weren't sticking out in front, but coming out to the side. But I really like that they're not sitting up here on top. So they do provide some mesh wire loom for keeping the cables together, and then they have kind of this corrugated pipe on top. Now, when I was first putting this together, I wasn't 100% sure where this was supposed to go. They provide a couple of mounting brackets for cable management, but that wasn't necessarily 100% clear, and it could have been my bad on reading it wrong. But you do want to run it up from the one side and down to the other. And then I have the cable just kind of snugged down but looped back around, which keeps it out of the way of the rail and the wheels. But that'll also keep this up and off of your material bed. If you don't do that, it may have a tendency to drag across there. And that's something I've seen other laser manufacturers have, just this wire loom the whole way. And as this gets to over this side, that loom hangs down and can drag across there. But in this case, if you mount it this way where the pipe comes up and then back down and then just loop this wire back around, it should work pretty well for you. Now, an interesting thing, this does have your typical resin wheels with bearings on them. A lot of them will have just 3, 2 top, 1 bottom, or vice versa. They have 4, and they do have eccentric nuts, so you do want to adjust those properly. But that does add to a little bit of the stability of this frame. It helps keep it square and help keep the everything tight. You do need to adjust those eccentric wheels just enough. You want them just so that the wheels will grab but not press into this too far. They also do provide a nice plastic piece that helps keep the other cable going over to your stepper motor on this side in that channel. That was a nice little benefit there as well. This base laser for their base price does not include the honeycomb. It's not necessarily required, especially if you're just doing engraving, but if you are going to do some cutting, I strongly recommend you look into some type of honeycomb. They do have a package where they sell one with it, but just note that for the basic kit, this is not included. Now they do have on the bottom a plastic shroud that does help block some of the light. So if you're running this open frame without an enclosure, you're definitely going to want to keep that shroud on there. But I strongly recommend you also look into an enclosure that will allow to help contain any of the smoke and debris, allow you to exhaust that out, and also help protect your eyes as well. Keep the shroud on if you're going to running it outside of an enclosure. Otherwise, if you have an enclosure, you can actually take this off. It's just held on by magnets. As a matter of fact, to focus the machine, you do need to remove this. You can run it without it, and actually that can help improve some airflow, but you will want to make sure that you're checking the bottom lens and that it's keeping clear. Over time, it can capture a little bit of smoke and dust and debris, and as the laser hits that can actually cause problems with etching on the laser lens. So now you do need to remove this to focus it. They do provide you with this little aluminum cylinder, and the idea is you would set your material down on your work surface. You would place this underneath the module. There is a little thumb screw on the side. You loosen that up, push it down to where it just rests on there, and then you slide that away. And now that will set your focal distance for this. This is 23 millimeters in length from top to bottom, so you could cut your own tool for this if you lose this. And that is one of my gripes about these is these kind of chunks of blocks for focus are nice, but they can get misplaced. I may look at creating just some little carrier for this on the rail here just to kind of keep it with the laser. But just keep in mind, it's 23 millimeters from the surface of your material to the base of your laser module to get this in focus. Now, being a budget laser, I don't necessarily expect a lot of frills on here, but one thing that I am impressed that they did include, even at this low price, is they do have limit switches for both your X and Y axis. This will allow you to home the machine, and that's going to home to the front left corner. And from there, you can actually run the laser in absolute coordinates. We're going to do a little bit of cut tests, but this thing is really going to shine when it comes to engraving. So we're going to look through a few different types of engravings you might do on different mediums, and we'll see how it performs. So let's jump right into that. All right, so longtime viewers of this channel know that I like to base a lot of my tests around 3mm Baltic birch plywood. It's something I use in a lot of different applications, and I've had a lot of it on hand over the years, so it's been kind of a baseline. However, they mentioned that it could cut 4mm plywood in one pass, so wanted to see what I could get that was as close to that. I do have some of this birch plywood that is from Home Depot. They sell it in packs that you can buy online. And it is about 3.5 millimeters, maybe a little shy of that. So it's close to the 4mm. I don't have any exact 4mm plywood, but I figured this was as close. So wanted to run that test, and this is what we came up with. So we ran it from 150 on up to 450 millimeters a minute, hoping that we'd get something in there. And we did cut out at 80, 90, and 100% power in the 150 millimeters a minute. However, as I flip this around, you'll see that those were the only ones really truly coming through. So yes, it can cut through this plywood. Now, some plywood, even the Baltic birch, I think would probably been a little bit harder. Probably would have had to slow it down to 100 millimeters a minute at that point. But knowing the limitations of this laser in that it would be more of an engraving machine or light cutting machine for other materials, I wasn't too worried about that. If you're getting into denser materials or thicker materials, harder materials, you're definitely going to want to step up, and there's plenty of options out there now for that. But if you're sticking to thinner, lighter weight materials, this is definitely going to still perform, and I'll show you right now. So your typical material for this laser is going to be more in the 16th inch or roughly 1.5 millimeter basswood. This is readily available at most craft stores. You could probably find it at a lot of your big box home improvement centers as well, in kind of the craft and hobby section. And so I went ahead and ran my first test. Here we go again. This was at 100 to 250 millimeters a minute, and it blasted through all of them in one pass. You can see on the back side, there was a little bit of overburning on here, but even still clean up there at the 250 millimeters a minute. So with that information in hand, I jumped it up from 325 to 500 millimeters a minute, and this is where we ended up. So even at the 500 millimeters a minute, we were still squeaking out at 100% power. So even 475 at 100, but you know, I don't like pushing it that hard if I don't have to, and especially since I had such a gradient here. I would comfortably say 400 to maybe 450 at 80 to 90% power. You're still gonna be able to get through this. Now this is solid basswood. It is no layers, there's no glue in here, and it's fairly clear and clean. So this is ideal cutting for this, but you gotta remember, this doesn't have an air assist on it either. It's just doing it with the beam power, no additional air. And so front side, you see those cuts there. I'll flip around to the back side. You can kind of see those as well. They're fairly clean. There's not a lot of extra scorching. So really, that's actually not too bad for this. I was pleasantly surprised at the power of this to be able to cut through this material. I figured I was gonna be maybe maxing out around 300, but be able to get through it 400 to 500 with this 6-watt diode is a nice bonus. So what could you do with that? Well, you could do some simple crafts. And just as an example here, I took some of that 1/16 or 1.5 millimeter basswood and cut these out. Now these are about 2 inches tall, maybe 1.3 inches wide. And you could make some wooden earrings. I know a lot of people like making some more natural earrings out of wood and some stone, and or maybe mixing in some acrylic as well. Definitely still capable of some cutting. You can do this. You could work with craft paper, maybe some lightweight cardboards as well. But as you get into those thicker materials in the wood, you're going to want to step up maybe into the P1, their 10-watt laser, or even their P2, their 33-watt laser. So having covered the cutting, we wanted to dive into the engraving. And of course here I broke out the Baltic birch plywood and did an engraving test. And here you see the results here. Getting very nice and dark up in the higher levels, but dropping off. And so we had a good gradient here. And this was done from 3,000 millimeters a minute on up to 8,000 millimeters a minute. Now the machine can go up to 10,000, but I did not rerun this, pushing this any faster, because as you can see here at the 8,000, you know, in the 50 and the 60, we're really dropping off. And then you're not even really seeing much of a marking at 10, barely at 20. So I felt that that, as far as a gradient, was a pretty good step. And we could have gone up a little bit higher, but it would have made those darks a lot lighter, and it would have made our lower ratings of 10, 20, maybe even 30% irrelevant. So if we're doing photorealistic engravings based on this, I was going to stick around the maybe 5 to 7,000, 6,000 in the middle, somewhere in there, based on this material for my tests. So with that, I went ahead and ran a few tests. And so with that, I went ahead and ran my first engraving with this. So this is a picture I pulled off of laserpix.com. I'll have a link down to their website. They have both paid subscriptions as well as free laser photos that are sometimes user submitted, that you can go ahead and sometimes choose your DPI and such, but they're basically pre-dithered with some settings that should be successful for your laser. So went ahead and used that on this one, and then turned pass-through on, so I wasn't adding any extra dithering on this. But I ran this at 6,500 millimeters a minute, 90% max power, and this took just under 20 minutes to complete. And it came out all right. Maybe lost a little bit of the detail, probably could have dropped the contrast down just a little bit, and gotten some of the more definition in those dark areas. But the quality was there, the detail was there, and it was kind of holding true. Your outside lines are pretty straight. So I was pretty happy with that for a first engraving. So I went ahead and grabbed another one. This is a lizard. Again, it's off of their site. I believe this was most likely AI generated, but it's a lot of detail coming in there, and getting a lot of darks and a lot of whites. So with this one, we dropped it down to 6,000 millimeters a minute, bumped it up to 100% power, made sure our DPI was around 508, which gives us a 0.050 millimeter interval. So it's just below the spot size of this laser. And this came out really well. I unfortunately forgot to tag the time. I want to say it was around 25 to 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, but really impressive detail coming out of this. And this is on just some scrap plywood again, so you got some different grain issues and you see a little bit of variation there. But definitely some high quality there, some definition, even dealing with some miscellaneous random grain on this piece of material. So of course, it's not just plywood, natural woods that we can engrave with these. You can definitely engrave things like stone. And so here is a slate coaster. This is definitely a popular thing that people like to engrave. And so I ran again a speed and power test on here. And this one was going from 5,000 to 10,000 millimeters a minute and from 10 to 100% power. And there's some subtle differences here as you go up in speed, but you can definitely see that it's starting to get a little more yellowish or almost golden down here. And there's definitely some drop off up here in the 10,000 range. So definitely getting some gradients here. But also some very nice smooth engravings. So I went ahead and engraved on a couple coasters to test this out. And here you see a pretty good image. I think we've used this in the past on some things, but it has a nice kind of 3D effect on the honeycomb behind it. And it came out pretty well. And this is just straight on slate, nothing was prepared. And you get decent contrast there, but in certain angles it does kind of wash out. So from my past experience, I've used a satin polyacrylic and sprayed it before I engrave. And here you go, you see it just darkens up, adds a little more contrast to that. The satin gives it just a little bit of a sheen, but not so much, but it really makes those engravings pop. And so this worked out very well on here. And I was very happy with the results. So again, we ran these at about 8,000 millimeters a minute, 50% power, 0.050 interval, and they came out pretty well. And I believe each one of these was right around 8 minutes to finish the engravings. So another fun thing to work with diode lasers is working with anodized aluminum or painted metal. You can't really mark any metal with this. You can change the coating so you can remove anodization, or on some stainless steels you can actually mark and it kind of anneals it to create the coating to change the colors. So I had some anodized aluminum cards and went ahead and engraved those. So I started out with this blue style, and here you see we've got my logo along with the Acmer logo on there, and came out pretty well. I was running these at 8,000 millimeters a minute, 100% power. We had this at 0.06 lines per inch, and they took about 6 minutes to finish. I ran this blue one a few times here. You can see on the back side I ran it as well. Just wasn't getting as shiny as I thought it would be, even with taking a magic eraser and some Windex to it. So went ahead and swapped out for black, and here you see a lot shinier. Here we go, if we can get this to, there we go. A lot shinier of the metal, and so I'm not sure if it was those cards I was using or if it was this laser having trouble interacting with that blue, but the black ones definitely came out clearer, came out shinier, so I was happy with those. But it worked on both of them. And 6 minutes of cards for these. Obviously, you could do it faster with some, but if you're just going to be doing a few, not a big deal there. So another material that you can work with diode lasers is acrylics, certain kinds of acrylics. So if they are opaque and dark colors, generally you can work with them. But there's an interesting acrylic that's called scratch acrylic, and I had some of that, so I went ahead and ran engraving tests on them to see how it would work. And here you see it's blasting through the black layer, getting down to the yellow layer. And you'll see kind of on the left side here, it's still a little shaded because it wasn't quite getting through the black material there, but then it gets into the solid color. And so we were able to do this at actually fairly low power, but kind of settled in around the 4,200 millimeters a minute, and about 12.5% power was kind of the sweet spot where it was looking pretty clean, wasn't looking like it was getting overpowered. And so with that, went ahead and ran another image. Here's a nice lion's head. And again, ran this at 0.060 lines per inch, which is just under 500 DPI. And this came out very well. This did take about 25 minutes to finish. And it is about the size of a business card, but we're getting a lot of detail in there. This is really going through and adding that pixelated engraving, but very impressive quality. Very nice image. Just to kind of show you that with this smaller diode, the smaller spot size, you can actually really bump that quality up and get a lot of detail coming through in your engravings. So continuing on with a few fun different ways of working with your lasers, went ahead and got some tiles and some canvas boards out, got my spray paint out and coated them with a layer of black to give us something to engrave off, and that'll give us kind of a black and white engraving. So went into this, I actually only had one canvas on hand, so I wasn't able to make a test tile, so I made an educated guess, but went ahead and ran this one. Now this is a 6" by 8" hardboard canvas panel. And so I ran this at 7,000 millimeters a minute, 50% power. And this is an AI generated version of a Mandalorian helmet with Baby Grogu, or Grogu, as some people would call him, Baby Yoda. This came out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with the detail. It lost out some of the shading here where it was engraving, but this is one of those cases where you really want to go through and make a few light coats of paint, and as opposed to a big heavy coat. That'll give your laser an easier time to get through the layers of paint with some detail. So along those lines, also took some ceramic tile. These are really cheap white tiles, 4" square bathroom tiles, and just coated it in some regular black paint, and then went ahead and ran some engraving tests on here. And so this one I ran at 6,500 millimeters a minute, 40% power. And again, this is 4" square. Now there's a couple little spots here where I accidentally nicked the paint before I got in there. But this took about 43 minutes, but that detail in there is very impressive. A lot of high quality in the that high resolution there. And just something to speak to the power of a low watt laser that has a small focus size, really enhancing the detail of your photos. So I ran a number of tests, really focused on that engraving, and hopefully gave you a good picture of what this laser can do. It can cut some thinner materials, but really the engraving is where it shines. This laser did an awesome job in all the engravings that I threw at it. So definitely something that you could play around with. If engraving is more your thing, this is definitely a laser that could handle it. And at the lower power, you're gonna have definitely a range. You saw that it was able to get some really dark colors in that wood, but also still have some nice definition and contrast throughout else. All right, so there you have it. This is my initial review of the Acmer P1 S Pro 6-watt diode laser. I hope this gave you some good information on this laser. If you're looking to get into laser engraving or looking at a low-cost specific engraving machine, this might be something for you. If you have any questions or comments about this machine or anything you saw in this video, go ahead, leave a comment down below. Try to get back to those as quickly as I can. If you're interested in buying one of these, I will have a link down below for it to their site. That link is an affiliate link. Does give me a little bit of a commission back to you and lets them know that you found my video informational and helpful with this. And I appreciate you using that, but as always, no pressure. So once again, thanks for watching this video. I always appreciate everybody checking out what I've got going in my shop. I do a number of reviews, tutorials, and also some live streams with my friend the Clack Shack on Sunday nights. So if you like what you saw here, want to see more, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It all helps out this channel. And again, I really appreciate you being here. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks again for watching. Hope to see you next time, but I hope in the meantime you get out in your workshop and make something too. We'll see you soon.